This is Algebra 2, test number 6. We got through sections from 1.1 to 5.4. First thing we're doing is simplifying a radical expression. You have the square root of 63. You're going to simplify using perfect squares. 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4, 5 times 5, those numbers. What can you multiply one of those numbers by to get 63? The number 9 you can multiply by to get 63. Get 63. 9 times 7 is 63, and the square root of 9 is 3 times the square root of 7. Square root of 84 over 3. 84 can be separated into the square root of 4 over the square root of 21. That's a perfect square. It gives you 2 times the square root of 21 over the square root of 3. In order to get rid of the square root of 3 at the bottom of the fraction, you multiply by whatever it is over itself, or you rationalize it. Multiply by whatever it is over itself, the square root of 3. So when you multiply straight across, you get 2 times the square root of 21 times the square root of 3 gives you the square root of 63 over the square root of 3 times itself gives you the square root of 9, which simplifies back to 3, what's under the radical. So you have 2 times the square root of 63 over 3. And then 63 can be broken up into the square root of 9 over the square root of 7. So you have 2 times the square root of 9 times the square root of 7 over 3. Square root of 9 is 3. So now you have 2 times 3 times the square root of 7 over 3. And when you multiply 2 times 3, you get 6 times the square root of 7 over 3. And 6 divided by 3 is 2 times the square root of 7, ultimately at the end of that problem. Number 3 says 4 times over the square root of 5. Again, rationalize it, so multiply whatever's on the bottom over itself. So multiply whatever it is at the bottom over itself. You get 4 times the square root of 5 over. You multiply the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, you get the square root of 25, which simplifies back to 5. 8 times the square root of 20. Could break down the perfect square. 4 times the square root of 5. Square root of 4 is the 2, so 8 times 2 is 16 times the square root of 5. For number 5, you get the square root of 12. That breaks down into the perfect square 4 and 3. So 2 times the square root of 3. 5 minus the negative 6. We know minus the negative means plus a positive. So it's 5 plus 6 is 11. Negative times a negative is a positive. Anytime they're the same sign, they're positive. Opposite signs, they're negative. 9 times 4 is 36. 36 divided by 6 is 6. Rationalize it. 4 times the square root of 2 over 2 times the square root of 2 times itself. That's how you rationalize, by multiplying whatever's on the bottom over itself. You get 4 times the square root of 2 over 2, and you could divide 4 by 2 to get 2 times the square root of 2. 10 says the square root of 6 times the square root of 2. When you multiply those by each other, you get the square root of 12. The square root of 12 can be broken up into the square root of 4 and 3, because 4 is a perfect square. Square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 3. 11, you have to FOIL it. You do the first numbers, negative 6 times 2. The outer numbers, negative 6 times the square root of 5. The inner numbers, negative square root of 5 times 2. And the last two numbers, a negative square root of 5 times the square root of 5. When you do those, you get negative 12 minus 6 times the square root of 5 minus 2 times the square root of 5 minus the square root of 25. Then combine your like terms. Like terms act the same as if you were doing 2x plus 1x. They have the exact same variable raised to the exact same exponent. Square roots act the same way. They have the exact same square root 5 here. So we can put negative 6 and negative 2 together and get negative 8 times the square root of 5. We could also simplify negative square root of 25 to call it negative 5. Then we have another set of like terms, negative 12 and negative 5. When we put those together, we get negative 17 minus 8 times the square root of 5. Number 12 says we get negative 2 minus the square root of 6 squared. Multiply that whole thing by itself. Negative 2, and then you FOIL it out. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Negative 2 times negative square root of 6 is positive 2 times the square root of 6. Negative 6, the negative square root of 6 times negative 2 is positive 2 times the square root of 6, and then negative square root of 6 times negative square root of 6 is positive square root of 36. So we can put the like terms together, 2 times the square root of 6 and 2 times the square root of 6 to get 4 times the square root of 6. And we could take the square root of 36, it's a perfect square, so it means positive 6. We can put 4 and 6 together to get 10, so we have 10 plus 4 times the square root of 6. Same thing as number 12, except we don't have to write it out this time. We FOIL it out. The square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. The square root of 2 times the negative. So square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. Square root of 2 times the negative square root of 7 is negative square root of 14. Positive square root of 7 times square root of 2 is positive square root of 14. And then the square root of 7 times the negative square root of 7. So we have like terms of square root of 14, negative square root of 14, and positive square root of 14. They will cancel each other out. The square root of 4 is 2, and minus the square root of 49 means minus 7. So we wind up, when these cancel out, we wind up with 2 minus 7, which is negative 5. 14, we have to distribute negative 3 times negative 4y is positive 12y, and negative 3 times 2 is minus 6, minus 8y. Once you have it distributed, then combine your like terms, 12y and negative 8y, and it leaves you with 4y minus 6. 15 says 4y minus 12 equals 13 minus 7y. Undo minus 7y by adding it to both sides. 4y plus 7y is 11y minus 12 equals 13. Undo minus 12 by adding it to both sides. 11y equals 25. Undo 11 times something by dividing by 11 on both sides. And y equals 25 over 11. Distribute 6 to y plus 1. 6 times y is 6y. 6 times 1 is plus 6. So you have negative 9y minus 13 equals 6y plus 6. Move your smaller y's over to your larger ones again. Your smaller one's the negative value. Undo it by adding 9y to both sides. So you have negative, that'll cancel out the left. You'll have negative 13 by itself on the left equals 6y, and 9y is 15y plus 6. Undo plus 6 by subtracting it on both sides. It'll cancel out the right side for you and leave you with negative 13 minus 6 is negative 19 equals just 15y. Then get rid of 15 times something by dividing by 15. It'll cancel it out, leave you with just y on the right equals negative 19 over 15. 17, you have to distribute both 6 and negative 0.2. So 6 times x is 6x. 6 times negative 0.8 is negative 4.8. Negative 0.2 times 5x is negative 1x. And negative 0.2 times negative 4 is positive 0.8, and it's all equal to negative 3. Then combine your like terms. You can combine 6x and negative 1x to get 5x, and you can combine negative 4.8 and positive 0.8 to get negative 4, and again, equal to negative 3. So then undo minus 4 by adding it to both sides. It'll cancel on the left, leave you with just 5x on the left. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1, so then get rid of 5 times something by dividing by 5 on both sides, and x equals 1/5. 18, you need to undo minus 5 on the right by adding 5. If you add it to the right, add it to the left. Negative 6 plus 5 is negative 1. So you have negative 1 equals x over 8. Undo x over or x divided by 8 by multiplying by 8. It'll cancel it out on the right side for you and leave you with just x. When you multiply to right, you got to do the same thing to the left. 8 times negative 1 is negative 8 is equal to x. 19 says 9 plus 8n equals 65. Undo positive or plus 9 by subtracting 9 on both sides. It'll cancel the left for you and leave you with just 8n on the left equals 65 minus 9 is 56. Then get rid of 6 times something by dividing by 8. I'm sorry, 8 times something by dividing by 8 on both sides leaves you with n equals 56 divided by 8 is 7. 8 times y is 8y. 8 times 2 is 16 equals 120. Undo plus 16 by subtracting it on both sides. It'll cancel. 8y equals 104. Undo 8 times something by dividing by 8 on both sides. Y equals 104 divided by 18, which is by 8, which is 13. Number 21 says simplify negative 6 plus 6 squared times 3 minus 6 cubed. So do what's inside that first set of parentheses first. Negative 6 plus 6 squared. So we got to do 6 squared first. Negative 6 plus 6 times 6 is 36. And then do what's in the second set of parentheses. 3 minus 6 is negative 3. So then evaluate your exponents for the second one. Negative 3 cubed means negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. And that times negative 3 is negative 27. So it leaves you with 30 right next to negative 27. So that means they multiply by each other and give you negative 710. You need to make a mapping diagram of the relation. Your first set of all your x values are your domain or your inputs. This is your input or your domain. And all of your y values are your output or your range. List them in ascending order, meaning you want them to count in numerical order, and make sure the relations, the arrows that combine them, like negative 1 and 2, make sure they connect each other. For f of x equals 5x plus 1, find f of 3. So in place of x, we're plugging in 3. So we have 5 times 3 plus 1. That's just substituting in given values. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 1. That's just multiplying. And then 15 plus 1 is 16. So f of 3 is equal to 16. You don't divide by 3 or anything like that. Some of y'all are doing that. You don't do that. F of 3 equals 16. Then graphing this equation, there's different ways to graph. You could plug in values like negative 1, 0, and 1, or negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. But everybody in here has learned about the slope-intercept form. This is in slope-intercept form because it says y equals mx plus b. B tells you where to begin. B's value is a positive 2. So you begin, it's your y-intercept. You begin on the y-axis at positive 2. M's value is 2 over 5. It's positive. That tells you to go up 2 times, so up once, twice, and over 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So your second point will be right there. You have 2 points. You can draw a straight line through your 2 points, straight as you can. Your graph will look like that. 25 says find the slope. The slope formula is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So just plug the values in. We all know it's xy, xy. We'll just call the first point sub 1, the second one sub 2. So y sub 2 is negative 10. Just plug that one in first. Minus y sub 1. Minus a negative means plus 9. And then x sub 2 is 12. Minus x sub 1 is 8. So negative 10 minus a negative means negative 10 plus 9, which is negative 1. And 12 minus 8 is positive 4. So the slope of that one is negative 1 over 4. 26 says evaluate y equals x plus 6 times x minus 7 when x's value is 9. So plug in 9 for both of them. 9 plus 6 is 15. 9 minus 7 is 2. And 15 times 2 is 30. Then we're just naming properties. Negative 4 times x plus 10 becomes negative 4x minus 40. That's just a distributive property. That's just giving negative 4 to both terms, both of the binomial terms. Negative 5.4 times 1 remains negative 5.4, so that's the identity property. It's the same at the beginning and the end. Its identity does not change. 29 says, this way we know. 29 says negative 5a minus 2b. Plug in negative 3 in place of a. So you have negative 5 times negative 3 minus 2 times plug in negative 1 in place of b times negative 1. So multiply negative 5 times negative 3 and you get a positive 15. And negative 2 and negative 1, you get a positive 2. 15 plus 2 is 17. For number 30, plug in 3 in place of the x's. So negative 2 times 3 squared minus 2 times 3 minus 5. Then evaluate your exponents. 3 squared means 3 times 3, so you have negative 2 times 9, minus 2 times 3 minus 5. Negative 2 times 9 is negative 18. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6 minus 5. Then combine your like terms. Negative 18 minus 6 is negative 24, and minus 5 is negative 29. Then we have number 31 says write it in terms of I. So it says the square root of negative 6. Remember, there's no such thing as the square root of negative 6. So in order to take the negative out, we just say I times the square root of 6. Then it says plot the complex number. 2 minus 4i. Remember, the first number is the real number. That's the x-axis. So you start at the origin, and you go to the right 2 times since it's positive 2. The second number, negative 4i, is the imaginary one. Remember, imaginary ends in a y. It's on the y-axis. It's negative, so it tells you to go down 4. So go to the right 2 times and down 4, and we'll plot our point right there. 33 says, in which quadrant is negative 2 positive or plus 3i? Again, this is just like x, comma, y. So negative 2, 3. So we know from negative 2, 3, you go to the left 2 times and up 3 times. And that's, remember, it counts counterclockwise, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. It's in quadrant 2. 34, we're solving 2x squared plus 3 equals negative 13. Undo plus 3 by subtracting it. Do the same on the right-hand side. You get 2x squared equals negative 16. Undo 2 times something by dividing by 2 on both sides. They'll cancel out and leave you with just x squared on the left equals negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. Then get rid of x squared by taking the square root of it. So you have x equals the square root of negative 8. Remember, there are no real numbers that are the square root of negative 8. So we have to get rid of that negative by pulling I out. So imaginary number times the square root of 8, and then you can break up the square root of 8 into the perfect square root of 4 times 2, square root of 2, and the perfect square root of 4 is the number 2. So I times 2 times the square root of 2, and written in standard form, positive or negative, 2 times the square root of 2 times I.